All right, everybody, let's get started. First of all, thank you for coming and signing in to the generational face-off, millennials versus boomers. This is a different kind of webinar that we're providing, and hope you are as excited as we are, so welcome. A couple of just housekeeping notes. You will see the slides after. They will be distributed to everybody who attends, so don't worry about copying stuff down or drawing the pictures. We will be sending those around. So with that, let's dive in. So my name is Scott Brooks. I am a Vice President Partner with OrgVitality, and I'm delighted to welcome you to OrgVitality's Webinar Showdown as Millennial Victoria Hendrickson, Senior Consultant here at OV, takes on her baby boomer boss and CEO, Jeffrey Saltzman. Now, before the fighters enter this ring, here's some background information. First, who are the baby boomers? Well, the baby boomers are typically 53 to 71 years old, and they're not going anywhere. According to a recent Gallup poll, 49% of baby boomers in the workforce, they say they're not going to retire until they're older than 66, and 10%, in fact, say they'll never retire at all. So who are the millennials? Millennials are basically 20 to 36-year-olds and ready to take on the world. So the question is, why do we need to get along? Why are we having this webinar? Well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, by 2020, just in a few years, 46% or nearly half of the workforce will be comprised of millennials. So with that intro and setting the stage, I want to say that what we're going to have is a face-off, but the Jeff and Victoria will be dramatizing their positions a little bit in order to make points, and rest assured that no one will be hurt in this smackdown, and also rest assured for those of you who have this bent that in the end the conclusions reached and the sort of observations made will be all based in the latest of academic research and not just the internet polls that you might have seen. So let's meet our opponents. In this corner, we have Victoria. Let's call her a brand new employee. She's got some great ideas about how to radically change how things are done and wants to implement them starting immediately while also receiving a substantial raise and a promotion. And in this corner, we have Jeff, who's been running with good success this company for a long time and sees no reason to change anything ever. So with that introduction, let's go and join our contestants in the face-off.
In my day, someone would get a job out of high school or college and slowly learn the ropes, climbing the corporate ladder, making their way up the ranks. You didn't complain or demand, you paid your dues. That's what I did. Now as a CEO, I see these millennials coming in fresh out of college, thinking they can run the company better than I can. My God, some of my socks are older than they are.
Yeah, sure, Jeff, and some of your ideas are as well. I was just on the phone with my mom. She says I'm brilliant, and so I need to stand up for myself. I've got great ideas that can improve the business, and if you value that, you should promote me. And really, why should I wait? I'm highly educated, I've got some great ideas, and I have the technical know-how to get it implemented. You old baby boomers just sit around and wait for things to happen, but I'm ready to make them happen.
The times they are a-changing, huh? Where have I heard that before? Oh yeah, it's an old Bob Dylan song from the 60s. It's great to have ideas, but you aren't successful just for having an idea. You have to persevere through difficult times. All you young people are so impatient and want things to happen so quickly. Instant gratification. They don't finish one thing before jumping on to the next. You need to successfully move things from concept to testing to day-to-day implementation. These kids are in such a rush they never get to implementation, but leave things halfway done. In business, things can take time. You can't rush headfirst into every new and seemingly great idea you have.
Would you tell that to Mark Zuckerberg?
And there's the problem with your generation. You all see yourselves as the next Mark Zuckerberg, but he's an outlier, 1 in a million. Your generation are all grabbing for that brass ring and don't understand when it turns out to be an illusion. Your ideas are not necessarily the next Facebook, but you all think they are.
All right, maybe not, but that doesn't mean my ideas aren't valid. Am I just supposed to sit on good ideas because I'm young? Is that what you mean when you say I need to be more patient at work? Would you say something different if I had more gray hair?
You know, I can let you borrow some of my gray hair. It's fallen out anyway, so I guess I don't need it anymore. But you bring up a good question. What is patience in the workplace? Is it the same as perseverance? In the world of business, perseverance, or the ability to stick to something, to see it through, is often viewed as a positive personality characteristic. You know, innovators, inventors, entrepreneurs all fail many times before finally succeeding. In other words, I'm not saying sit on your ideas until you're older. Just realize that even the best ideas take time and lots of trial and error. This isn't anything new. You know, Edison failed over and over before he got a working light bulb, as did the Wright brothers while working on their plane.
All right, I get it. Millennials get that. We get the need for failure on the way to success. But I think what we're doing is challenging the old school definition of patience. Patience feels more like a guru sitting cross-legged on a mountaintop. Gurus, for some reason, are never depicted as young people, or female for that matter, but rather as old men with beards. The stereotype that somehow wisdom has to come with age and with patience and apparently maleness. But if you're telling millennials that we need to persevere, then I think we agree. I feel like we can be tough and we can persevere through difficulties. That sentiment feels a lot more useful than waiting around or waiting for someone else to change.
I think we can agree on the importance of perseverance over patience. You can persevere at learning and work, but you know, as you look around the world and see the conditions of many of the humans living on it, the notion of, patience, all good things come to those who wait, that rings rather hollow, doesn't it? We must all go out and make things happen for positive change to occur.
I like that. The way you describe it sounds similar to resilience. I like to think of myself as resilient, and I think most people seem to be very good at that. When people are faced with adversity, they're able to keep at it or to recover and try again. The problem is that millennials get criticized for not being patient, because patience is something that has both a positive and a negative connotation, whereas perseverance is generally considered positive. And that's where the generational stereotypes come in. When a characteristic can have both positive and negative attributes, it can be viewed either positively or negatively depending on the point you're trying to make. It's kind of like using folk wisdom to fit whatever situation you're in.
I'd agree with that. Just like your old male guru, there's also an image of a grouchy old get-off-my-lawn man. It's rare to see a grouchy old woman depicted, and you would never see a grouchy young person yelling, "Get off my lawn." But you know what? I assure you they're out there. The world is full of old men who would love to see kids playing on their lawn, and kids who would never dream of trespassing without permission. All we need to do is look past these stereotypes. Individual differences and characteristics are key. Young people can certainly be patient. They can certainly persevere. Victoria, did you have to persevere to get your PhD? Were there obstacles or perhaps a test or two you had to overcome? Of course, getting a PhD today is probably easy, not like it was in my day. They can also be impatient and eager to get ahead quickly and be seen as wanting rewards without paying their dues by others. But there are older generational people who would also fit those characteristics to a T as well.
That's true. And yes, I certainly did have to persevere, I think. But, on the same token, I would say you don't exactly fit the stereotype of a slow-moving, overly patient CEO.
My wife snorted laughing when I asked her if I was patient. As a CEO, I have to remind myself daily to have patience. CEOs in general have a proclivity towards action and towards getting things done quickly. Time is the enemy. When a project takes more time, it's less profitable. When a support task takes more time, it costs the company more in both dollars and resources. When a new product rollout takes longer, you take the risk of a competitor beating you to market and grabbing market share, damaging the company. Or an environmental change can occur, which makes your investment in the new product meaningless. As a CEO, you want things done, and you want them done quickly.
So then why do you think millennials like me working for your company might be frustrated with the slow pace of new product rollouts?
It's all a balancing act. On the flip side, as a CEO, you want the company's reputation to be sterling. Things done quickly run the risk of being haphazard or of poor quality. That can damage the organization also. So each and every day, a balance must be achieved between speed and quality. The trick is to figure out how to do these things quickly with high quality and at the lowest possible cost. A lot of these so-called generational issues have more to do with where you are or your level in the company. Let's say I have a very talented millennial working in my new product research. This person has a great idea for a new product that could really help our clients and be very profitable to the company. I get the idea and I like it. But as CEO, I might see a larger situation. The new product might displace an existing profitable product, or the new idea might need to have legal protections put into place, or it might need to be tested across cultures or countries. Or we might first have to develop prototypes. That may delay it. Is the millennial's frustration with me because I'm a baby boomer? Or is it possible that this is simply because he or she isn't aware of all the other issues that need to be considered to successfully bring a new product to market?
So is this maybe an issue of communication?
You know, I suppose I could do a better job of telling my employees what's happening with their projects or helping them see the bigger picture. I can see why someone might be frustrated, regardless of age, if a good project seems stalled. But that communication should go both ways. If I had a couple of tips for people on multi-generational teams who are having these kinds of frustrations, I would say two things. First, we want to communicate with employees to make sure they understand the rationales behind decisions. A yes or no by itself doesn't let them see the thoughtfulness that goes behind the scenes. Often employees might be impatient because they just haven't heard back on a project or an idea, and it isn't fair to them. So first, let's make sure to close the loop and explain that the decisions will take longer or why it's been made. And why, right? Once that's been done, we must give the employee some insight into the situation. So if a project has been stalled to allow for more testing, instead of just telling them that the project's been killed or stalled, walk them through what needs to happen. Explain the value of testing and the kind of testing that needs to happen. Help them learn from this. I bet next time they'll build testing into their timeline. They may even find a better way to do it. So that's the first tip. Spending more time explaining decisions to our employees and helping them learn more about the whole picture. The second tip has to do with empowerment. If an employee is feeling like they aren't being responded to, they need to feel a constructive way to raise that issue. In some of my research over the years, I've often seen employees who feel more empowered are generally more positive on other aspects of the work as well, a real bonus in a culture. And as a CEO, I can't always be thinking of what each employee might be wondering. At my age, I'm lucky if I can remember their names. But you already knew that, didn't you, Veronica? No, wait a minute, it'll come to me. Valerie? No, sorry, I mean Victoria. Yes, that's it, Victoria. Now, where did I leave my cardigan?
Right behind you, Jeff. All right, but joking aside, I get it. That makes sense. Employees need to take ownership of why they may be frustrated and to be a part of finding the solution. It shouldn't all fall to you. But speaking of frustration, there's another area where millennials get criticized pretty often. We're told that we're too ambitious and that we get too frustrated when we hit a roadblock on our career path. What do you think?
Well, you know, it's true that all you young people want to progress so quickly in your careers without paying your dues. You know, I teach leadership in an MBA program, and each session I begin by asking the students why they're pursuing their MBA. In every class, every single time, at least one person says it's because once they graduate, they want someone to hire them to run their company for them. And I ask them why they think someone would do that. And they usually say it's because they have an MBA. You know, kids.
Yeah, I have to say, I do have a couple of friends that might say something like that. But that said, I don't think that's true for most of us. I think we are willing to pay our dues, just not necessarily at one company forever. You baby boomers are so loyal to your companies. Often the same company where you got your first start is the company you've stayed with. And so you don't understand why sometimes our career paths are less linear and they look more like a zigzag. But we're really facing a different reality. We can't expect to have one company have our back for our whole career. We're not going to spend 40 years working at the same place and then retire with a nice pension. Organizations these days just don't make the same kind of investments in employees anymore, and they don't hold on to people in the same way they used to. So people who are starting their careers now know that they can't expect their company to have a clear career path with stable jobs for them for an extended period of time. So because of that, we always need to be ready for the next step. If we can't count on organizations for long-term stability, why should we put the organization before ourselves?
Baby boomers felt the economic turmoil of the 2008 recession just as much as millennials, and were well aware that in tight times, they're often the first on the chopping block. But the older generation simply takes a more long-term approach. For example, I began my professional career as an internal IO psychologist with a large company. I changed companies and moved to a consulting firm where over time I took on more responsibility and broadened business. Eventually I became the CEO. Not because it was something I'd always dreamed of, but out of necessity. We did pretty well and the company grew, but I ended up leaving that company and starting OrgVitality with a few others. Again, I took on the role of a CEO. My ambition now, to build a company that will outlast me, to create opportunities for others, and have a company that's recognized as a leader in its field. But millennials, they start off on day one thinking they know better than the CEO. They're only about themselves and look out for self-promoting interests. They want to develop their own personal brand and view their work at the company as in service of furthering their career or interests.
That might be true, Jeff, but I think I could point you to some older generation folks whose only interest is their own self-interest.
Very, very true. I can think of a lot of current examples of that, that's for sure.
Yeah, and a lot has changed since you entered the workforce. As the job market has become more volatile, employees of all ages can no longer count on staying with the same company for their entire career. So because of that, we have to stay relevant in case we suddenly need to search for a new job.
You don't think baby boomers feel intense pressure to stay relevant?
Yeah, I don't think I'm saying that. But there's an expectation from most companies today that millennials will use their personal social media platforms, their Twitter, LinkedIn, even Facebook, to build a professional brand that will help them promote the company. Most of my friends feel pressure to build their own brand through a blog or Twitter following so that they're more enticing to potential employers or clients. Speaking of, make sure all of you check out my blog, victoriahendrickson.com. But aside from that quick plug, I don't think boomers face that same expectation. At this stage in your career, you're not likely looking to reinvent your professional image, are you?
Well, I have my own blog, jeffreysaltzman.wordpress.com. How's that different from what millennials are doing?
Okay, so maybe it's not just millennials who feel pressure to build their brand. But then why is it only millennials who get called out for having ambition? Why shouldn't we be ambitious? Did you know that millennials are the most educated generation, yet we're also the generation with the greatest amount of student loan debt and the most underemployment? If we seem overly ambitious, it might be because we have an enormous amount of student debt we need to pay off.
I don't think you can blame everything on circumstance. According to a LinkedIn study, 68% of millennials would sacrifice a friendship with a colleague for a promotion, compared to 62% of baby boomers who would never consider it. What does that say about your generation, that a workplace friendship means nothing?
I don't know if it means nothing. I think in a Facebook world where people might have hundreds, if not thousands of quote-unquote friends, the word friend becomes to lose its meaning or to mean something different. More millennials would describe what you're thinking of as friends as being their family. In fact, more of us millennials tend to spend holidays with our tight-knit groups of friends rather than actual relatives. But a survey like that, like the one you're referencing, is probably referring more to what we think of as the Facebook version of the word friend.
Do millennials feel that the enemy of my enemy is a friend? In my world, only a real friend is a friend, and you don't sacrifice that for a promotion or other ambition. But that brings up an important point of how we each define things. Your generation is thinking about acquaintances, while mine is thinking about a long-term, real friend. And your generation may be more eager for a promotion since you are building up your career. The risk-reward balance is simply different. I can remember feeling similarly and very eager for promotions and recognition when I was beginning my career. There's a lot of similarities between how you describe your experience and how I felt at your age. When you look at the reasons people take a job generation by generation, something interesting shows up. The driving force of what causes people to take a job, regardless of generation, are identical. First off comes equity issues such as pay and benefits. In other words, for what I put into the job, will I be treated fairly or equitably? This includes things like flexibility, which is a hot topic today, which people put a value on. Second, will the work itself be interesting? Is this work I'll find interesting and meaningful? Third is the organizational brand. Is this a company where I can be proud of what we do and proud of letting people know I work there? Fourth is personal development. Will I get experiences at this organization which will help me and professionally develop as a person? Experiences that will make me better at what I do. And fifth, let's call them pain factors. Pain factors are those factors that, is it easy or hard to get to work, and do I have to travel to work, and can I juggle that with my other schedules? Sometimes you just can't make it work, or the pain factors are great enough that the job is just deemed as not worth it.
Mm-hmm. So, what you're saying, it sounds like a lot of it is more about the work and about the company, not so much about the generation of the person. So if millennials can find the right role and persevere through difficult times, they'll ultimately be rewarded and recognized for that, right?
That all may be true, but it's hard to take a lot of millennials seriously. I might take them more seriously if they worked harder. When I was younger, we understood that we needed to put in time and effort to show our worth. We didn't expect that we'd show up at work at 10 a.m. and leave at 4 p.m. to meet a friend at happy hour and still somehow get ahead.
I know. My dad reminds me about this all the time. He always tells me he was the first to arrive at the office and the last to leave, and that told his boss that he really cared about his work. But, the time you're sitting in the office isn't always synonymous with how hard you work. I feel like baby boomers assume that since they do most of their work sitting at a desk in an office, that millennials must not be working if they aren't at a desk in an office. But that's just not true. Our use of technology allows us to work differently. As an example, let's say I did come into the office at 10 and I did leave at 4 to go to happy hour. That doesn't mean I'm lazy and I only worked 6 hours. I probably started checking my emails at 6 o'clock in the morning so that I can catch colleagues on the East Coast and in Europe before they finish their day, because that's part of my reality, being on a global team. Maybe I then took a break to get ready, get myself to the office, and I worked there from 10 to 4. And let's say I do leave at 4 to go to a happy hour with an acquaintance in the industry. Maybe it's to network generally, maybe it's to get a sense for if there's a business opportunity, but it's work related. And then let's say I get home and fire off more emails from my phone or my iPad for another couple hours. I'd look at that day and say I was working between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. or maybe even later with a couple of breaks. That's twice the time I was in the office. So maybe I don't work for 12 hours in the same place you do, but I still put in 12 hours of really useful, meaningful work. But you assume I just worked for 6 hours and blew off the rest of my day.
Yes, I can see that. That's true. Everyone works differently. But that does bring up a good point. People generally have different work styles that are related to their individual characteristics. I know you aren't a lazy millennial. How many marathons have you run? 10? On the last one in Chicago, weren't you in the top 1% of women runners? And of course you have that PhD. I bet, just to guess now, mind you, that to achieve what you have, you work pretty hard. So maybe it's nothing to do with being a millennial and everything to do with personal characteristics. Your day is much busier and richer than what we see for 6 hours in the office. I'm reminded of some employee research we did that showed that in general, the vast majority of people want to do a good job at work. There's a handful, maybe 5% or less, who are just trying to skate by, but most are not like that. Unfortunately, organizations tend to make rules for the bottom of the distribution and not for the average or above average person. They tend to make rules for the worst case. I try to buck that trend at OV. I want to enable the best case. For instance, we don't have a set vacation policy or hours in a day. In fact, my HR policy boils down to more or less, use your common sense. Violators will be persecuted. Not everyone can handle that, There's an amount of freedom there, and it makes some people uncomfortable. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with generation. Some people just need more structure. I view it as treating people as adults who want to do a good job and to help the organization succeed. So no matter age or generation, people who are hard workers will find different ways to do that, I guess.
Yep, that makes sense. There will always be individual differences. So I do think the stereotype of millennials being lazy or not wanting to work hard, in combination with the constant access our technology affords us, can put a lot of pressure on millennials to really go into overdrive. I was just reading a recent Harvard Business Review article reviewing the work habits and work ethic of millennials. It talks about a troubling pattern of workaholism and something called work martyrdom in millennials. Basically, some millennials feel that since they are often not taken very seriously, that they have to work more than anyone else in order to be valued in their organization. Since employers now have access to employees 24/7 through smartphones, a lot of employees feel that they must always be on and to respond at all hours. And not only just respond, but just generally feel like they're doing a lot all the time. A lot of millennials are labeled as what's called a work martyr. They feel that they must show that they are the only one who can do their work, that they are not replaceable, and they feel the need to show above and beyond kinds of dedication to their company, many of them going as far as saying they feel guilty for taking their paid time off. About 43% of those millennials surveyed fit this definition, compared to only 29% across all generations. Even more concerning is that almost half of millennials want their boss to see them this way, as what's called a work martyr, while only about 20% of baby boomers want their boss to see them as a work martyr. And look, I get it. It's obviously good for people to be dedicated to their work and to want to do well. But some of this pattern is concerning to me. 59% of millennials say they're ashamed to take their vacation. 42% of millennials say they've made fun of a coworker for taking a vacation. And while that's less than half, that's twice as many as any other generation. And so what are the implications of that? You know, right now, 1 in 4 millennials is a manager. In the coming years, that's going to double. As millennials come into more leadership roles, they're the ones setting an example. If they're ashamed to take vacations, and if they believe that they need to constantly be working in order for the company to run properly, that can set up some real issues. Not only does it risk burning out those millennials very quickly, but it sets the example for others coming up the ranks that things like vacations or taking time for yourself is a bad thing to do. That to be a good worker, you have to sacrifice yourself for the good of the company. It feels to me like that could set up a really toxic culture.
It certainly could set up a toxic culture. It's important to set clear expectations now so that millennials take on more leadership and mentoring roles. They're in a healthy place themselves and model healthy behaviors to the rest of the organization. Yeah, I prefer the term work-life integration rather than work-life balance. Balance suggests that life is good and work is bad, but integration means you have the flexibility to integrate the two into an overall healthier whole. One thing I try to do as CEO is role model a good integration between work and life. My employees know that I work very hard and do what I need to do to get important work done, but that I also make sure I spend quality time with my family. I may wake up very early to take a client call with someone in Europe, but I also might leave in the afternoon to watch my daughter in a high school science competition. Did I mention she's going to MIT next year? The point is, I can role model that this is a healthy balance, and it's very possible to be successful while achieving that healthy balance. There are a couple of things organizations can do to keep these kind of expectations clear and bring it all together. The first is to be very clear about what's expected in terms of working hours. There could be core hours, for instance. If people need to be in the office by a certain time for team meetings, be sure everyone understands that. Often when arrangements are flexible, people assume that flexibility applies globally, and that can lead to some misunderstandings. So just be sure any expectations you have are clearly communicated. Second, evaluate people for their work and their contribution, not hours spent doing the work. For example, if Victoria is off at happy hour, I might want to know what came of it. If it led to new business, then it's certainly a good impact and contribution to reward, rather than chastising her for leaving early. I'm very confident Victoria doesn't goof off, and I need her to understand that I trust her on that front. Third is modeling and reinforcing good behavior. There are small and large ways to do this. One is standing by the policies we set. So if there is flexibility to what time employees arrive, we have to stand by that. We can't then judge employees who show up a little later because they use their morning for something else. Those of us who are more senior in the organization can be sure to model what healthy work ethics look like. That means we work really hard to meet organizational needs. Sometimes that means working over the weekend or taking a late call. but we also make sure to take vacations. We need to communicate that this is okay and to help employees who have a hard time. Your role as a senior manager is to enable employees to perform at the highest level possible. If we see an employee continually working nutty hours with no end in sight, we're responsible for correcting that situation. It may mean resources or prioritization and having them understand that they're valued for their contributions and not just for the hours. You know, certain industries like Wall Street are known for having what's called face time. No one leaves before the boss. That's not healthy in the long term, and it's not suitable for the individual. All of these things are true across generations. I'm speaking specifically to some of the issues you raised about difficulties millennials have, often working with baby boomers, but these guidelines are really applicable to everyone. Sometimes the difficulty of millennials and baby boomers coming together on this is that baby boomers don't experience these work-life integration issues the same way because they're at a different point in their life. Much of what is subscribed to as generational differences are actually life cycle differences.
That's a great point. Millennials and baby boomers are just at different places because of their age, and that impacts their priorities. There's even a lot of differences within millennials. If you look at older millennials with kids and a mortgage, they probably act a lot more like boomers compared to millennials in their early 20s. But I think a lot of older people I know consider their work-life balance in terms of how much time they get to spend with their family, who's usually spouses and kids, and that's important for them. But for me, it's different. I'm not married and I don't have kids. So finding time with them isn't an issue, but that doesn't mean I don't have work-life balance prioritizations. Doesn't mean I don't have family to prioritize or that I don't need other kinds of balance. And I guess the boomers were probably like that before they were married and had kids. So, you know, I might prioritize my work-life balance as things like having enough flexibility to spend time with my friends or have my hobbies like running and travel. You know, Jeff, I've always got to be ready to run fast for when a boomer's chasing me down.
I'm not going to chase you, but yes, we all have different needs, given that our lives are so different. One thing that came up for me as you were describing different needs is that there's a shift between balance and integration. It used to be that people always talked about balance. There needs to be time for work and time for life. And maybe your life is your family and hobbies and travel or something else, but that those life activities are separate and distinct from work and you need time for each. You know, now, the way people think about it, it's more like integration. Earlier, you were talking about constantly being connected with technology. There's a dark side to being connected, but technology allows us to work in different ways so that we can better integrate all parts of our lives, including work.
It does. I love the fact that I can work from anywhere. If I don't have calls, I can work from a coffee shop for the day, or I can be traveling and connect from anywhere without missing a beat. But it does bring up a good point of how the lines between work and other parts of life aren't exactly clear all the time. In some ways, work and life cross over because many people are never completely off or not working. They're connected virtually, and because of that, they're constantly a representative of their company, and that can be stressful. In a world with smartphones and viral links, you have to make sure that everything you say and do reflects well, not just on yourself, but on your organization.
That's something I wrestle with as a CEO. I mentioned my blog earlier. It's something I really enjoy. I enjoy writing about different things that come to me either about organizations or just phenomena out in the world that interests me. But sometimes I feel the need to be careful about what I write about. As the CEO of OrgVitality, if I write about something controversial that reflects on the company and can impact the way our clients or potential clients think of us, I just need to be a little more careful. For instance, after the election, I wanted to write. I had a lot to say. I still do. And while much of it is about the human condition and how we interact with each other, some of it could feel very politicized. So I had to make a call on what was appropriate and what wasn't.
I imagine that's a hard call. Sometimes I feel like that with my social media. I find interesting things that I either want to post or comment on, but sometimes they're very aggressively feminist, and they could be interpreted in a bad way or maybe in a way I didn't intend if it was taken out of context or by someone who doesn't know me very well. So I try to keep my professional social media separate from my personal. What I post to my blog or to LinkedIn is much different than what I post to Facebook, but there are blurred lines. I've had clients try to friend me on Facebook, and I usually decline them because I want to keep my business and my personal lives separate.
That's remarkably similar to what I do. I try to limit my Facebook to family and personal friends, and LinkedIn is business. Social media is a tricky one. You're representing yourself as a professional, and some people use social media for professional connections or even searches. We've had some clients find us by searching for survey providers on social media. And that brings up the question of what can we as an organization expect of employees? If a social media account is personal, can we ask employees to share company content there? Or if they interact with clients there, do we have a say over their profile content? It's a strange line to navigate.
I guess I didn't realize that you thought about these kinds of issues with social media and the fuzzy boundaries. I guess I assume that baby boomers don't know much about social media, and if anything, that you shy away from it.
You know, I may not use it as much as you do, but it's relevant to me. In my roles, the kinds of ways I may think about it are different than the ways you do, but that's because I'm the CEO, and not because I'm old and can't figure out how to like a post on Facebook. You know, in many ways, we're wrestling with the same questions, how to handle the fuzzy boundaries between work and other life activities. It's tough to figure out how to have a personal life when it's more integrated with your professional life. But while we both struggle with this, maybe our concerns or our focus is different. You want to make sure you represent yourself in a professional way as you establish yourself as an early career professional. And as the CEO, you know, I'm never off the clock. It's 24/7, 365. That's because of the occupation and not the generation. I need to make sure I represent the company well as a leader and that I can make my employees be effective in how they represent the company. In many ways, this is similar to other topics we've discussed today. We're facing similar challenges, but we might experience them differently, not because you're a millennial and I'm a baby boomer per se, but because of our different life stages and different roles, and we also have different priorities.
Agreed. So, Jeff, you know, we started this conversation when I came into your office with my new product development ideas. And it sounds like they can't work as the way I originally described them, but would you be willing to walk through it and tell me why, in your experience, these approaches haven't worked in the past?
I'd love to. Let's go through it. There are some good nuggets in here and some new ways of thinking that I hadn't seen before. Maybe if we work together, we can refine them and come up with something even better. So we're going to break character for just a moment and speak about the issues we've been illustrating. I really hope this webinar, it's different for us. It's a unique webinar we tried, and I hope it's really shown that a lot of these so-called generational differences can often be attributed more to lifestyle changes instead. You know, Peter Capelli, a well-known researcher at the Wharton School, found that in his research, millennials aren't different than the rest of us. They're just younger.
Like a lot of things in life, there's a balance, a yin and a yang. There are so many ways in which we're the same. We all have the same human desires for respect, meaning, and recognition. But there are ways in which we experience life events differently, just simply because where we are in our life stage.
And, you know, contrary to what you read in the popular press or what some consulting companies are pushing, the reality is that by and large, generational differences in the workplace largely fall into the category of myth. If we choose to concentrate on the differences between us, differences can be found. But we're all much more similar than we are different. For instance, find me anywhere in the world of any generation someone who doesn't want to be treated with respect and dignity at work, or someone who doesn't want fair treatment, that for any effort they expend that they get back a fair reward, or someone who doesn't want to have a bright future for themselves, either at the company they're currently at or at another. Many more common core psychological characteristics can be named. What is different is how these characteristics are expressed depending on the external environment. In a high unemployment situation, everybody becomes concerned about job security, especially those that have a mortgage or other significant financial obligation. It looks like generational differences only because certain generations at that point in time, at that life stage, might have more financial obligations. There's more variation on characteristics within a generation or other demographics than there is across generations. And let me repeat that one more time, because we find this over and over again, that there's more variation on characteristics within a generation or other demographic than there is across generations. I can find a hardworking millennial just as I can find a hardworking boomer. And for every lazy millennial, I can find a lazy boomer. The point of today was to demonstrate how some common misperceptions of the differences are just that, misperceptions, and to show that it's more important to maximize everybody's strengths and support any challenges. Let me turn it back over to you, Scott.
Well, thanks. I feel like I've been a fly on the wall kind of listening in here, and I appreciate the conversation. Let me bring it home with one question for each of you, if I can. So, Victoria, I give you survey results, and there's a demographic that makes you see a cut by generation, and there's a demographic that makes you see a cut by age. You're interpreting it to somebody. What one or two bullet points would be your guidelines for how you interpret that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. And I think the implication here is that there are different kind of differences in each of these survey results that you're showing me.
Yeah, and maybe also have another demographic that shows you tenure cuts or something like that. And there's some differences. What do you say? What do you do?
Yeah, so we are going to see some differences. If we slice and dice the data by whether it's age or generation, the newer, younger generation might be a little more positive, and people who are, more mature might be a little more negative. But I would expect that to be more about the tenure with the organization than the age of the person themselves. And of course, there's a confound there. The younger you are, the less time you could have been at that organization, so your tenure is likely to be lower. And that's because we see this phenomenon over and over with tenure, where the newest employees are the most positive. They're still in a honeymoon period. They're really excited to be there, and they're finding great things. Whereas people who have been there a little longer, who have run into some frustrations and are just experiencing the organization differently. So that doesn't have to do with am I 25 or am I 40 years old? But it has to do more with what have I experienced in this organization so far.
Okay, cool. So to sum that up, if you're ranking the demographics, it sounds like you think in terms of tenure dynamics first, age second, and then maybe if you get to it, and if it still feels important, generation. Okay.
That's right. And I think it's not just to prioritize my analysis, but because if we're talking to a group and looking at these differences, the things we can act on have more to do with tenure. We can control more experiences that early, career people or, people new to the organization have compared to what age are you and what experiences will you get. Nice.
Excellent. So Jeff, quick question for you. Literally, I just got in my email inbox one of these things that I'm sure we all get, which said, a new finding about millennials versus other people and expectations of creativity in the workforce. How should I think about stuff like that flows through my inbox?
Well, it's when you see something like that in your inbox and you sort of see the headline of generational differences, and you see that over and over and over, and it begins to become its own reality, right? But what they often ascribe to is generational differences, that, this group feels different than that group. It may be more to do with, again, life stages. For instance, if you have a 70-year-old accountant and that's 70, you go to see that accountant says, I don't feel like being creative. I don't want to try do anything. I've been doing it the same way for 35, 40 years, and that's the way I want to keep doing it. When that guy was 20 years old, he was different, and he was ready to try new things and experiment and do things in a different way. And it doesn't have anything to do with him being of a certain generation, but it has an awful lot to do with the life stage that professional is at. And yet, when you look at it sort of at a 10,000-foot level, it's easy to ascribe, oh, this older generation doesn't want to change. But it really, you got to take it in the context and forget about generation. What was this person like when they were 20? Now let's look at the younger generation. What were they like when they're 20? And let's compare apples to apples, and then see if you really find differences, or whether the differences are ascribed to some other variables, such as a tendency towards risk or a tendency to creativity that's independent of the generational differences that so many people ascribe are out there.
Nice. Excellent. So unless I'm looking at research that compares 20-year-olds today to the boomers when they were 20, I should take it all with a grain of salt and say, yeah, it's just probably age.
Take it with a grain of salt and get off my lawn.
Yeah, right. All right, so let me bring this to a close. As you can see on the slide, we've got more webinars coming in 2017. This one had a different kind of conversational format, but again, we have a different discussion coming up on corporate responsibility at the end of this month. Understanding the triple bottom line. Look for information about that, or excuse me, feel free to ask. And then later on in the year, we talk about, is the traditional survey dead? Or navigating tech choices in the world today, and is innovation dead? And I promise we'll talk about things and whether or not they're alive, not just dead. But that's information to come looking for. And then just as a reminder, at OrgVitality, we are a firm where we like to think about these kinds of questions a lot, and we like to deal with data that look at what are organizations trying to drive in terms of strategy. How do we understand, collect, analyze the data that answers questions about that actually drive action that makes a difference? And so if you have an interest in talking about surveys or 360s or any other kinds of metrics and whatnot, please drop us a line. So hope you enjoyed this webinar. And looks like no blood was shed through the course of this conversation. Jeff, Victoria, I want to thank you so much. Any final messages as we hang up? Or
I really do like Victoria a lot, by the way.
All right.
No hard feelings.
I promise we're not this bad.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.